Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, Unbought and Unbossed. Brothers and sisters, can all of you see Shirley Chisholm? Can you see her? Who are your former president? Shirley Chisholm!
We walked together down an important street. That street was Constitution Avenue, and only 27% of the 52% of the American people voted for our president. America has gone to sleep. Collective talents and abilities should be utilized by all of us in order to try and help make this world a better place in which to live.
I love that introduction. Hi. I'm ChelseaDee. I'm your moderator this evening, and I'm also a co-curator and associate producer at the National Black Theater. This is the NBT at Home Conversation series, Unbought and Unbossed, Reclaiming Our Vote. And this is part 2. Catch us next week for our, or not next week, but October 29th for our final conversation, part 3. These conversations are happening in tandem with the release of our Digital Commission series. This is a series of public service announcements coming at you from Black women artists, letting you know what's really going on, what the truth is, and what we need to be doing in this election season. Those are coming at you every Wednesday. So check out our Instagram, our Facebook, and website to catch those. Last week, we released My Right to Voice, My Right to Vote by Mahogany L. Brown. Check that out. And this week, we've just released Ngozi Anyanwu's You're Going to Be Okay. So check both of those out. Really inspirational stuff. And we have so many more lined up and so many that have been released. So dig into that. This series is in partnership with Michelle Obama's When We All Vote. This is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that is on a mission to increase participation in every election and close the race and age voting gap. So without further ado, I would like to welcome this evening's guests, 2 of this evening's guests, and we will be joined by a 3rd special guest later this evening. But I would like for everyone to give a digital snap round of applause. Welcome to our guests, Stephanie L. Young and Rhonda Ross. Woody woot, woot, woot. So we're going to get into right now, letting the folks know who you are, what you are about. I know that seems like a big question. What are you about? What is your whole mission in life? No, but just get to know you a little bit with our check-in questions. So today, I'd like you to give us your name, your pronoun, and your accessibility. Tell us a little bit about who you are, your art form, what you do, and when, why, how did the political become personal for you? And the final question is, what does it mean to you to be unbought and unbossed, politically or personally, or both? Let's see, Rhonda Ross, do you want to start us off?
Yes, hi ChelseaDee. So good to see you. Happy to be here. Those were a lot of questions.
I know.
So I'm going to answer them all. That might be our whole time. So maybe we'll go back and forth. And
yes, yeah.
I'll go back and forth. I'm Rhonda Ross. My pronouns are she and her. I'm out in Los Angeles right now, though I live in New York. I am a storyteller at heart. Most of my stories come through song, but many of them also come through prose and poetry and theater. I am in the process of doing everything I can to empower myself, to calm myself, during this time, to keep my eye on the prize. And I like to say, keep my eye on the whys, why I'm here, why I'm doing what I do, why I want a different world, a different way of being than we've had, why I want to vote, why I want to get everyone else to vote. So I keep my eye on the whys. And in my work, I do that personally, and I'm doing that now. So if I'm a little distracted, that's where my head is. But at the same time, I do that in my storytelling, in my music, in my poetry. That's what I do. I hope that my work empowers and leads people to a sense of deep self-understanding and self-love.
Oof. I mean, I feel like you're living in a place of being unbought and unbossed.
Oh, and I didn't even answer that question yet.
Well, that's the last one. You were knocking them out, though.
I got more to say. You want me to keep going, or should we switch back?
Well, just answer for us. Like, what does it mean to you to be unbought and unbossed? This famous phrase from Shirley Chisholm.
Yeah. You know, I love that you asked that, and I love that you all are creating this whole program around it, because I had thought about it, but I hadn't really thought about it. So, so in prep for this, I've always said unbought and unbossed, like as if it's a one thing. But when I looked at it, it really is two separate issues. And what I see is unbought has to do with someone. I saw a lot of carrot and stick, right? I saw a lot of good cop, bad cop. I saw a lot of strategies that use both the flattery of you, the compliment of you, the gift giving of you, the money giving of you, the bribery of you, what they want you to do, or the threatening, the extortion, the pain, the harm, the intimidation of you, to get you to do. So to be unbought and unbossed is this straight and narrow between that, where you keep your eye on the whys, on the prize, where you're focused, where your focus is unconditional. Neither side can deter you, right?
I love it.
So that's what it means to me, and that's what I'm trying to do, and what I'm hoping we as a people will do. Keep our eye. Don't let the distractions on one side or the other deter us or distract us, right?
I so appreciate that. Because, you know, and that's one of the goals, I think, with this conversation series for me personally, is like, where's the clarity? How can we see through this historical moment? Because these things, you know, we have been in situations like this prior, and we have found our way through to this present moment now.
See, there's so many things happening on so many levels that can take your breath away at a moment's notice, that can keep you up at night, that can, you know, take all your patience, all of your, you know, like everything. And there's so much going on that I think we have to just keep getting present, getting focused, you know, staying clear about our own healing and our own balance. And for me, and that's why I'm looking forward to hearing so much of what Stephanie has to say. For me, getting informed is a huge part of that. A huge part of that, because there's so much coming at you. You don't know how much of what's real, what's not real, what's biased, what, you know, you got to get informed. You got to get educated. And that helps you become unbossed and unbought, right? That idea of educated, that you know what you know. You know what you know. Yeah.
You know the whys. I love that. Keep the eyes on the whys. Got to get that. Stephanie L. Young. So excited to have you here. Hi. Let's check in. And just if you need a reminder, just let me know. I'll pepper you with questions.
No, luckily you guys have in this chat.
Oh, there you go.
I will glance over. I feel like I should have gone before Rhonda, okay, because that was amazing. So let me try to keep up. But my name is Stephanie Young. I go by she and her. That's my pronouns. I'm currently in Atlanta. I do live in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, but I'm home in Atlanta. I've been here since quarantine started with my family. Okay, the next question is who I am, what my art form is. I am a communicator. I work very hard to make sure that through my work as a political communicator, I can be potentially a culture shifter. And I can give people the tools and resources that they need to empower them to use their voices in a multitude of ways, be that become more civic engaged, be that just become more informed, be better citizens, vote in each and every election. I am passionate about the intersection of culture and politics because they both influence each other. I think we can see that even more now. So it is so incredibly important for these types of conversations to happen with these creative minds and beings, because you have so much power to shift culture, to tell stories, to inform people in ways that are not just creative, but can really spur people to action. And I really hope that moving forward, we can continue this open dialogue, because our government, our politics won't survive if there's not this partnership, I think, with the art world holistically. When, why, how, and who we kind of became political in my family, or not in my family, but in my life. I'll say this. I became political probably when I didn't even realize it. I was 8 years old when I lived in Cape Town, South Africa, in 1992 to 1996. So I got to experience the transition from apartheid to democracy. I got to see President Nelson Mandela be elected. I got to see my parents hold voter registration and education drives in South Africa, all over the country through our denomination, the AME Church, where my father served as a bishop there for those 4 incredible years. And that has imparted so much on my life and has given me a sense of responsibility to use my gifts and my talents to help move this culture forward in every way possible that I can. I have worked forever in politics, but again, I can't tell you how much I'm in love with theater. I'm in love with culture. I'm in love with the arts. And I see the great need for, again, that marriage there. So it's always been personal for me to live out my ideas and my ideals of who this country can be, and use who I am to help make it better. And Unbought and Unbossed, Rhonda, she covered a lot of that, and I agree with pretty much everything she said. I want to hone in on one thing she mentioned, which was staying focused. When I think about being unbought, it is staying focused. We have been thrown into the ringer. Beyond just the misinformation that we get continuously from a multitude of different platforms, we have been in complete and utter chaos. And it is so easy to get distracted. It's so easy to get depressed. It's so easy to lose focus and to lose hope. And that's a part of the plan. And I think that we have to remember as informed citizens that it's so important for us to stay focused, because the moment we take our eye off the ball, which we have, we end up in situations that we don't recognize. So when I think about Unbought, I think about staying focused. And Unbossed, I think about our power as women. I think about the recent debate with Senator Harris and Vice President Pence, and when she had to say, "I am speaking." About sitting at tables every day where I have to say that, or getting on a Zoom call. Now we don't go to meetings, but getting on a Zoom call and people say, "Am I only talking to you?" Yes, you're only talking to me. And that's okay, because I do some things too. So I think about being unbossed in that way, as standing up in our power as women, as Black women, and not being afraid to speak up and to show the world who exactly we are. So glad to be here with you both today.
That's so awesome. I'm so glad you bring up South Africa as well, because that was actually studying their history was one of the first times I realized art can be used as a social tool. It's not just an elitist practice that only a few people get to engage in and only enhances a certain demographic's life. Like, no, art theater was being used to talk about things, to address to keep people focused, to keep people clear about this is the creation of a new nation here, which is really exciting to be in this election season and thinking about that again. Yes, please.
I remember seeing Serafina. I probably was 4 or 5, but saw that in the theater, actually here in Atlanta. So I still remember faintly, right? I remember that moment. And when we moved there, my sister thought I was going to have to go to a school like Serafina, which I did not have to do that. But you're right. Like that movement really permeated American culture and popular culture in a way that I don't think other movements did. We knew obviously the movement in the 60s was huge, right? And a lot of artists, as we know, were a part of that movement. But the way in which the anti-apartheid movement really was in the culture was on a different world. It was, there was stage play. There were so many different things that people tapped into and were creative about. So, yeah.
And Rhonda, can you talk to us a little bit about your work for 100 Years, 100 Women and in partnership with NBT? Because this is sometimes I think, oh, I'm just an actor, I'm just a writer, and I'm just involving myself in these things and tra-la-la. But, I really appreciate, Stephanie, you highlighting the relationship between culture and and politics and society and how all of these things are so intermeshed. So, Rhonda, do you want to talk to us a little about what you did for 100 Years, 100 Women, and how do you see your storytelling in all of the ways that you mentioned how you can convey a story? How do you see that as part of your civic engagement, like a part of how you are opening the door for people to become involved and yourself as well?
Yeah, thank you. That's really it's such an important question, I think, especially for we artists.
Yes.
Because we have a tendency to feel like if we're not on the front lines in a very literal way, that somehow the art that we're doing may not be making a difference. But I know that it is making a difference, and it's something I think about a lot. So let me start with what my work is I like to take difficult, sharp emotions and situations and thoughts and feelings and put them into words in such a way that I and hopefully the listener of my song or whatever can untangle them, right? Pull them apart, see them for what they are, not be so afraid of them. And when you're not so afraid of them, you can sit in their presence and they are de-escalated and you can heal. And I believe that it's that healing that leads to all of the other things that we're wanting, all the other things that we're fighting for, going for, hoping for, dreaming for. It starts with a personal healing where once you're healed and you love yourself and you know your value, you know that you matter, you do not accept a certain situation, certain treatment, certain whatever, that it comes from inside. And I mean, we've seen that we're seeing that now. We're seeing that now with the movement for Black Lives, and we're seeing that. We've seen it in the 60s. We saw it in South Africa. We've seen say, no, I'm worthy of more than this because I know my value. So my work as an artist, I believe, starts in that space where I help to untangle those things so we each can know our value and know that we matter. So in terms of 100 Years, 100 Women, the call to me from National Black Theater was to make a piece. I think I was told it's the anniversary of the 19th Amendment, where women got the right to vote. Make a piece. So first of all, I'm on quarantine. I'm a performing artist where I'm quarantined away from anybody I would perform with, including my husband. I wasn't even with him, and he plays piano, but I wasn't even with him. And so I thought, how am I going to make a piece? How am I going to, make a piece? So I started really asking myself, not so much what I was going to make, but again, why I was going to make it, and what was I stumbling over? What was I choking on that was making this feel so difficult? And it took me weeks of asking that question over and over and over again, and looking at it and untangling it as I just described. And what I realized was that I don't have a big connection to the 19th Amendment. Huh. That's interesting. And there was this feeling of, yes, I'm supposed to make this piece about, and I thought, no, I don't feel that. And then I said, well, why don't I feel that? And I started doing that research, both personally asking myself those questions. Why don't I feel connected to the 19th Amendment? And then actual academic research. And then I was like, oh, right. Because that's a different one for me. And so these questions of intersectionality, these questions of what it is to live on the crossroads of race and gender and all of these things. And so I made a piece that was just asking that was just exploring that. It didn't answer it. It didn't come up with any kind of decision about, should the 19th Amendment mean something to me? Should it not? Am I Black first? Am I female first? It just explored all of those feelings, all of the feelings of all those questions. And just on a more logistic, personal note, I created, like I said, it was on my mind. I created a piece. I had to do a video piece, and that was unfamiliar to me because, like I said, I'm a performing artist. And so, but I created a piece, and I was thrilled with it. I used Abby Lincoln, who is one of my mentors, as my inspiration. And I used Abby Lincoln, and I had, Black activists all thrown in there, and they were photos and video that I didn't own the rights to. And so 3 days before it was due, I said to myself, yeah. I'm not kidding. Like 2 days before it was due, I was like, you know what? I don't have the rights to this stuff. I don't think I can use it. So I literally revamped the entire project about 2 days before it was due. And because I had to use things that I had the rights to, I had taken all these selfies throughout the quarantine. And so I used these selfies. And then I said, well, if I'm using these selfies, this is like a self-portrait. Well, that makes sense because I'm talking about the intersectionality that I'm exploring being, between race and gender. And so I made it a self-portrait. I changed the whole thing about 48 hours before. And I was really pleased with what came out, but it wouldn't have come out had I not had all those iterations of it.
Yes, and the untangling.
And the untangling
that you went through personally for your process to make that.
Yeah.
And I feel civically engaged with what you're bringing up about the centennial of the 19th Amendment. I mean, 100 years since the ratification of the 19th Amendment, and Black women. And as I learned there was an entire commission that was created to really celebrate this and get people informed about it. But there were so many women of color who were so active in getting women the right to vote, and then, not being able to enjoy that right for many. Is that Mama Ida?
That's Mama Ida. Mama Ida. So during my work for that piece, I started just gravitating, grabbing all of this information. And yes, she came up so strongly for me. And I had a knowledge of her, but I became insatiable. And I Googled and YouTubed and all that, but then I grabbed this book. This is excellent, by the way.
Passionate for justice.
Yeah.
Excellent book. Excellent.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. I got really, engaged.
Yeah. You know what I mean? You get turned on to these things, and then you're like, well, how can I separate the two? How can I, after, really studying South Africa, I'm like, well, how can I ever really divorce my art from my social justice advocacy? How can I ever really say that those two things are not linked and are not so meaningful to me, and why, and my why, so intimately linked to that. Okay, let's shift. That's really rich though. I have so many quotes. I'm writing down stuff that everybody's saying. So anywho, today's topic, we're talking about Stacey Abrams, who ran for the governorship of Georgia in 2018. And came up against a lot of pushback from the. She was running against somebody who was also officiating the election,
Right.
And there was lots of legal battles around, just getting the vote count right and making sure that everyone's vote was being counted and everybody's the will is being represented of the people. And so I remember following this case and thinking, wow, it's 2018, and this is like voter suppression, like 60s level. And at the time, I didn't even realize there have been other eras, where voter suppression was like hugely a part of the culture, hugely steeped in what we were doing. So this experience of Stacey Abrams made me think when NBT was like, we want to talk about Black women and politics, and we want to highlight the contemporary and the historical. I thought this would be a really great time to talk about her struggle and how she used that struggle in Georgia to open up a much bigger conversation about the history of voter suppression in America, and what we can do today to actively engage with that and to actively make sure that we are asserting our citizenship. She has a wonderful story, just as a quick sidebar, about getting the message implicitly from her interaction with the security guard somewhere that she doesn't belong here. And there's a lot of, I think, messaging that we get around not belonging, around you shouldn't feel comfortable having the access to the power that your vote gives you. And you don't need to use that power. You know what I mean? And so her story is something that really, really made me start to think about, how can we see ourselves as active change agents? How can we see ourselves as people who are co-collaborating and building a new world? So here's a quote from Stacey that I think will start us off in the next half of our conversation. Stacey just did an interview with NPR about a documentary that was just released called All In. I might be getting the rest of the title.
No, that's right. That's her.
It's All In.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. It's just tracking how voter suppression has been a part of the history of this country. And these tactics and the desire to suppress the vote is not new. It's just kind of changing tactics. And so in an interview with NPR, Abrams says, "We should not live in a nation where your access to democracy depends on your celebrity, your wealth, or your zip code." And I think this is a quote that is just in the vein of a Shirley Chisholm. Stacey is stating very clearly, this is what you're dealing with. When your democracy comes down to zip code, wealth, celebrity, what's going on? How are we really going to engage with this? So to Stephanie, the first, great pulling that up, Nia. Nia's always behind the scenes doing the banner magic, okay? Peep the banners. Audience question, let us know in the chat. What is voter suppression? How do you define it? Where are you seeing it? And Stephanie, could you talk to us a bit about what are some tactics we're seeing around voter suppression this election season specifically?
Yeah, I do think it's important just to give a little bit of historical context in the documentary that you mentioned that Stacey did, and she was a producer of. It really was about her story. We'll also give you that. So I encourage everybody listening to watch a documentary. Also, make sure you watch Slay the Dragon on Hulu. It is excellent. It talks about voter suppression, but it also talks about gerrymandering, which I know people probably hear and they might pretend like they know, but they probably don't really know. This is an opportunity for everybody to get more informed about how critical and important that issue is. Especially, I think today is the last day around the census and gerrymandering and voter suppression are all linked.
Yes.
So if you have not done the census, please make sure you do the census. But you mentioned that, voting was not for anybody in this country but white landowning men.
Yeah.
And in about, I think it was around 1787, when white landowners in the South were outnumbered by enslaved people of color, Black people. They weren't on par with their northern counterparts. And that's when they said, well, look, we need some more numbers on our side to help us out. So what did? They made African Americans 3/5 of human beings. Said that if we put a couple of them together, then there'll be a whole human, and I'll have more people that I'm representing. So therefore, I'll have more power, more numbers, a bigger kind of electoral kind of college opportunity in Congress. And that was the birth of the Electoral College. That's why the system is old, it's antiquated, it needs to probably be done with. But that is for another conversation. So you're right. Nothing that we're seeing, nothing that we're experiencing is new at all. Yeah. Nothing. And what's so critically important is to remember that there right now is nothing new under the sun, and that we have to make sure that we are knowledgeable to what voter suppression actually looks like, and that we know our rights, so that we're not intimidated. And I think that, especially for us Black women, we should just talk to our parents, talk to our grandparents if they're still in our lives, talk to them about their voting experiences. And we've only had a very short life of a strong and equal access to the ballot box. It hasn't been that long. So the Voting Rights Act, which John Lewis helped to push and author, was gutted in 2013 during President Obama's second term. And what that did was take away certain provisions and protections, really, for people in states that had a history of voter suppression. So states like Georgia, Alabama, Florida, Texas, North Carolina. And then the moment those protections were taken away, these state legislatures that were all stacked in a different type of political direction decided to put in all of these draconian and really crazy rules and laws, from strict voter ID laws to strict laws around voting by mail, to the way that you actually get registered to vote. There are 13 states in 2020 that will not allow you to register to vote online. That makes absolutely no sense. So right there, you're already taking young people, process, and many other people out of the process. So voter suppression it doesn't look different, but every state, I think, has its own little form. Unfortunately, there's some amazing states that work super hard to ensure that voters have equal access to the ballot box, like California, like Oregon, even Utah, and other places like that have done a really exceptional job with making sure that there's not as many barriers to the polls. What we know, right now is that there's been really big voter purges of the list of those who vote. So let's just say you haven't voted in 2 or 3 years, or maybe even 4 years, and they may say, okay, well, this person hasn't voted for this long, so we'll take them off of the rolls, and then when they go to vote, because they think they can. Then they won't be able to, and they would have missed the deadline. So all of this is on purpose. There is nothing here that is by mistake. It has been orchestrated, and it hasn't happened overnight. And that's why it's going to take everybody fighting to ensure that the Voting Rights Act is restored. They've just named this legislation after John Lewis, which is I don't know if it's an honor, because the honor is actually passing it. The House of Representatives has passed it, but the Senate is just sitting on the desk of the Senate Majority Leader right now. So there are things that can absolutely be done. And what the Voting Rights Act being gutted did is just ensure that, folks could discriminate against people to ensure that everybody doesn't vote. And you have to ask yourself, right? If voting wasn't important, would people be going through these great lengths to stop you?
Right.
And that is what's so hurtful to me when I hear people say, oh, my vote doesn't count. It actually doesn't matter. They're all the same. All of that crap, that is like a voter suppression handbook. Spew all of that information, discourage as many people as possible, and let's see if people actually come out. So confusion is voter suppression, telling you whether or not you can actually vote by mail, or saying vote twice, or telling you that the Postal Service won't be able to handle it, or making sure that you have an exact match signature on your mail-in ballot. That's a form of voter suppression. I don't know about you guys, but I don't ever write my signature the same ever.
Twice, right?
Ever. Like, who writes signatures anymore anyway when you're doing most of that stuff electronically?
Right.
So all these little tactics, from making sure that, like, I'm home in Georgia now, and I thought, well, if I don't go back to go back to New York, perhaps I'm going to stay here. I might, get a Georgia ID and potentially, be a resident here for a while. But I won't be able to get registered or vote in Georgia if I don't have a Georgia license. All of these things, and who knows, I could be staying here. So at the end of the day, there's so many tactics. I don't want to focus on all of those things, but rather I want everybody to make sure that they know their rights. One thing that you can do is you can go to whenweallvote.org, click on our resources. We have a Know Your Rights page. We talk about what voter suppression looks like. Those long lines that you all see, polling places being open due to a shortage on poll workers. We've all of the coalition of voting organizations have worked really hard to recruit hundreds of thousands of new poll workers, but there's still some places where we need more. So folks can go to Power to the Polls to see some of those cities to potentially sign up. I know most of you guys are in New York, so that might not work for you, but you can reach out to friends that you have at other places to encourage them to potentially become poll workers. Another way we try to fight voter suppression is making your plan to vote. It sneaks up on you. Early voting starts really soon in some places if it hasn't already started. And if you don't make that plan to vote and make that plan to vote early, then you could fall susceptible to all the tricks of the trade by either, not turning your ballot in on time, or you're rushing on your ballot. So you misread and you write with blue ink and not black ink. There's little things like that you have to pay attention to. So that's why it's so critically important for everybody to take the time to make the plan. And when they make the plan, to actually go through it step by step to ensure that they are following all the rules, because we don't want anybody tripped up by it. And an informed voter cannot be suppressed. And one of our partners, the Lawyers Committee, has an amazing helpline, 7 days a week. Lawyers, over 20,000 lawyers around this country are volunteering their time to talk to you. So if you have a question, it doesn't even have to be, you could have a question for your mom that lives in another city or state. It doesn't matter. Call that number, 1-866-OUR-VOTE, and they will help you. They will answer any and every question you may have. And if you are at a polling place and somebody tells you, well, you're not on the rolls, don't leave. You stay there. You say you want a provisional ballot. And if you have any trouble, you stay right there. Do not leave, and call that hotline immediately and tell them what's happening. And if you see anything suspicious, I know that they're having robocalls, that they're calling seniors, mostly Black seniors, telling them there'll be debt collectors at polling places, telling them that election day is a different day. There are things that are happening to the most vulnerable around us. So that's why it's so critically important for all of us to work, not only just together, but to really pull our family, our friends, our coworkers, everybody together, and give them as much information as we can, and share all of the resources that we can with them, so that we're not leaving anybody behind. This week, we launched our Voting Squad Challenge. Mrs. Obama launched that with her co-chairs, including your sister Rhonda, one of our co-chairs. And the whole premise of being a voting squad, is making sure that you're able to help quell all of this noise and nonsense by giving people the resources that you have through When We All Vote, to make sure that they're making their plan to vote early. So what we like to say, as we're kind of looking forward to early voting, and we've just partnered with More Than a Vote, LeBron James's organization, is that when we all vote together, we become more than a vote. And that really means that we are becoming a movement, and we have to be in this together. And once we know better, once we're better informed, once we have more awareness around what things look like, around what voter suppression looks like, then we can combat it. And we have to then tell the people in our lives to do the same thing.
Awesome. I feel empowered, just listening. Yes,
so
Rhonda.
So good, Stephanie. I want to jump on a couple things. I love that you said an informed voter can't be suppressed. I love that. And I just want to say to people listening exactly what you just said, that each state is different in terms of what is needed: blue ink, black ink, signing outside, all that stuff. All that is different. And so the earlier you do it, you have more time to get informed, right? And then we've been reading in the news about how there's a chance that one of the strategies on the other side is to choose electors to just to vote for 45, no matter what the popular vote is, all of that kind of stuff, if the numbers are close enough. And so that's why I think the fact that we all vote, I love that, more than one vote, because when we all come together and overwhelm the system with our votes, that's, to me, because excuse me, I've also been reading this, right?
Oh,
right. So that to me is how the suppression is in so many areas that you almost can't keep up with all of them.
That's right.
How do you get past them? You overwhelm it with votes, right? You overwhelm it with our presence, where then those tricks don't work anymore.
Yeah. And, I do want to let people know, because I think that we've been probably down in the dumps for a while, but I want people to be at least a little bit inspired and excited to know that over 6 million people, almost 7 million people have cast their ballots early in this country. Okay. Compared to in 2016, it was only about 400,000 people. So we have surpassed that number by far. I don't know if you guys saw the lines in Georgia this weekend when early voting started. It was wrapped around, of course, but they worked it out. But I mean, people are excited to go vote. And I'm inspired to see that people do realize there is power. The only thing is, I want people to realize that you cannot just do it now. You have to continue to stay in the game. Don't leave out, because that's what happens. We pile on during a presidential election, and then we all go to sleep during the midterms and during other really important critical elections in your city and in your state. And that's another way that voter suppression can creep in, because you have all these state legislatures who are working day in and day out to figure out, well, how do we make it more complicated to vote in what is supposed to be a leading democracy in the world? And when we aren't paying attention to what those people are doing in our state houses, that's where we fall, victim. And by the time we look up, it's too late. So that's why voting for each and every office is so critically important. We have something called Ballot Ready in our Voter Resources Hub that you actually can see who's on your ballot ahead of time, do your own research. We have links that link out to who those people are. But that's why it's so important for us to vote in each and every election, and to make sure that we vote for every office. People usually say down the ballot. I've come to discover a lot of people don't know what down the ballot means. That literally just means every office. And it's incredibly important to do that, so that we can help to prevent and put people in place that believe voting should be for everybody and not for the select few. And then if you drive, I think about this a lot too, because people want to tap in and then tap out, but nobody goes to school for one day and goes, thank you, I have all the knowledge I need, I'm done with college. My first day, I'm good, right? That's what we do when we vote for in one election and we tap out. You're not graduated. You haven't gained anything. You haven't seen progress. It is a process that you have to be a part of. Nobody goes to church or a synagogue or the mosque and says, thank you, God, I have all I need from you, I'm done. No, you go every Sunday or every Saturday or whenever you're supposed to go, right? That's because it is a process. So civic engagement and voting is that same type of process. You have to put into it to get out of it. And the moment we don't put into it, especially on the local level, we end up where we are right now, where we have a lot of mountains that we have to climb. But I want people to still be encouraged to know that we've already climbed these mountains many times. And the blessing, I think, of where we are right now, with what we've continued to see in our streets, from police violence to civil unrest, to also a deadly virus that has ravished our land. Literally, it should show and tell us how every office actually really does matter, how every government official matters in our lives, how they have an impact on our lives, whether we're healthy or whether we are not. It is real. We can all see that. So I hope this is a great awakening that I think that we have needed to really come back to the plate and say, how are we all going to be a part of this team sport, which is democracy? And it is a team sport. It is not one-sided. And with 47% of Americans voting in 2016, that's only one side determining your future. And that's
and I love what you said about college and church. And I was thinking about it in terms of like budgeting, right? So So you skipping all the important little budgeting things throughout your months, your weeks and your months. You're not paying attention to how much you're spending on, I don't know, your lattes or going out to dinner or buying some shit.
Yeah.
You're not paying attention, none of that, right? And then you turn around and you're about to get evicted.
Yeah.
And so now you're about to get evicted. So you take all your little money and you pay your rent. And that to me is the presidential election, right? You go in, you pay your rent, you do what you got to do. Okay. But then the next day you need to start putting your stuff together so that you don't just keep coming up to every 4 years. You're about to get evicted. Every 4 years you got this huge problem on your hands. Yep. You gotta go deal with, And so, so it's the same kind of, it's maintenance, right? It's daily, weekly, monthly. You got to be thinking, who are making these choices for me. And like you said, what we saw during this pandemic is that there are offices and people in those offices making critical choices that we don't agree with because we didn't take the time to vote them in.
Yeah.
The ones that agree with where we are, what we want.
And share your values. Yeah.
My values, exactly.
I really do. Hello.
Hey, y'all. Hey, Steph.
Hey.
Hey, everybody.
How are you? Thanks for joining.
Hey, ChelseaDee. I'm good. We down to the fact. Y'all were just talking about it. We are in the home stretch. I will tell you, I've been a little nervous. I've been on like the internet. I didn't believe that Black men were repeating some of these talking points until my friends started doing it. And I'm up here, I can't type fast enough. I'm like, he is lying to you. He is lying.
Oh.
But they're like, the Democrats are, I'm like, no, not this time. Not that y'all vote for. So it's been interesting as we come into the final weeks, but happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so, your timing was just excellent. We're moving into a different part of the conversation, so it's great to have you here, DeRay. And am I pronouncing it right, DeRay? Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Sometimes I say people's names wrong, and I'm like saying it like that confidently. So I do want you to do a little bit of our check-in, which is what we did earlier, just so that folks who are unfamiliar with your work can get a little bit acclimated with who's on the line now. We have a new voice in the room. So could you give us your? Let me actually just paste it into the chat here. If you could tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do. I have here your art form, if you would like to talk about your creative endeavors as well. When, how, why, through what way did the political come personal for you? The last question is, thinking a lot about Shirley Chisholm's iconic campaign slogan for her run for presidency, Unbought and Unbossed. What does that mean to you, politically or personally, or both?
Yeah,
so those are check-in questions.
Won't take up a lot of time because I'm excited to have this this conversation with all of us. But I'm DeRay. I'm an activist. Help lead a group called Campaign Zero Focused. We spend a lot of time on police violence, like that's our thing, because we understand that the police are not ancillary to the issue of mass incarceration, but the police are key to it. That you can't name 3 ways you get to prison or jail that don't include a police officer. So that is like what we do. When I think about like how I became political, it was early when I was a youth organizer as a teenager, but teaching was one of the most powerful things I've ever done. I used to teach 6th grade math, and then I opened up an after school center for 5th through 8th graders. And there, every single night, every day, I saw the way the system's impacted my kids, their families. That was a big deal for me. It is a reason why I went in the street in Ferguson in the first place, was because at the time, the kids I taught would have been around the same age as Mike Brown, and that was big for me. So that was a life changer. And then Unbought and Unbossed. I think that so much of this moment has been an awakening for people about controlling their own destiny, about saying, like, I can actually usher in the future I deserve. I can imagine something and fight for it. And all of those things are real. So I'm always excited about being in conversation with incredible people like this, who are willing to put a stake in the ground about what we know we deserve.
Yeah. And that's an awesome segue into the next question that I have, which is, and Rhonda, you were just talking before DeRay came on a little bit about, you were giving an analogy about eviction, but I actually would like to talk about what are the pressing issues that you think people need to be aware of as they are going in to vote, as we're thinking about this election season, as we're thinking about civic engagement. This is the season to be thinking about that, even though we just discussed the season is all year round, all the time, to be engaged in these topics. So what do you all think is something that we need to be focusing on? And I can start us off, and then maybe we go myself, and then we'll go Rhonda, Stephanie, and then DeRay. But something I think that I would like for us to be really talking about is these rent moratoriums. How are we helping folks who are trying to make these rent payments during the pandemic? How are we protecting people from becoming houseless? And the numbers of evictions are continuing to rise, which is so. There's a lot of grief, which I think we'll talk about in a second. But there's a lot of grief for me around that.
Yeah.
Rhonda, what do you think? What's on the ballot for you? What's your?
I don't want to be vague, but literally, I think all of it. They all affect me. They all affect Black women. They all affect us as Black people. I mean, they do. Talk about intersectionality. They all do. Housing, healthcare. I don't know. Maybe healthcare. I don't know. Wage gap.
Where do we?
Racism, like police brutality, like the prison industrial complex, like climate change. I mean, literally, they're all, they are all on the. When I think about Roe versus Wade, when I think about one after the other of, it's really hard for me. It's hard for me to say this one is more important than this one, and they all intersect and they all connect. If you're gonna twist my arm and make me say, I would say probably health care.
Okay.
And wage gap.
Okay. I'm not holding you to it. Okay.
And no, they're all there. They're all there. I'm the mother of a son. They're all there. They're all there. Yeah.
Stephanie, what's looming large for you?
Yeah. So speaking on my behalf, just me, Stephanie Young, by myself, as When We All Vote as nonpartisan organization. I think Rhonda said it perfectly. It's all of it. We do have some really urgent needs when it comes to ensuring that people in this country have access to adequate and equal health care, considering that we're in a global pandemic. So that's a little urgent. But it's everything. What I would like to say, though, is that I do think, and it's not always us. When I say us, I'm speaking about us as Black people and Black women. But when we do go into the voting booth, thinking about people other than yourself. Just because you have access to something, or if you have, opportunity in ways that other people have, you can't just vote for yourself. Because if I don't do well, you don't do well. So when you do go into that voting booth and you think about issues, you have to think about issues that impact people more than you. You have to think about issues that are going to impact your children if you don't have them, your future children, or your nieces or nephews, somebody's child, okay? And I think that we've become such a selfish country. And I think it's so important to stop thinking about yourself and think about other people in other neighborhoods who may not have the access and opportunity that you had. And who are those elected officials that will go into office and think about more than just you? And I think it's so incredibly important that we start to take, not all of us, right? That many Americans start to take that philosophy forward, and they're thinking about other people when they go into that ballot box or that booth, because it's so incredibly important. And everybody is impacted by the way in which you vote. So it's thinking about folks other than yourself. I would be remiss if didn't mention climate change, considering all of the devastation with the fires that we've seen in California, and then you have the continual ramping up of hurricane after hurricane after hurricane. And it's really just not a joke. And it's not about, do you believe in climate change? We need to completely get rid of that phrase and that question from our vocabulary. Like, that doesn't make any sense. It's not, do you believe? Do you believe in light? Do you believe in dark? Do you believe in day and night? Come on. Like, climate change is real. So I think that we all have to make sure that that is top on our list, as well as we're thinking about these things, because we are literally seeing the world change right in front of us. I don't know how hot it is in California, but Rhonda started out outside, and I know that it's been, my sister lives in LA, and it's been very, very hot in October. So it's not a joke. And of course, criminal justice reform, I got the privilege to meet DeRay because of all the work that he did, and it's still doing on criminal justice reform. When I worked at the White House, I still remember the first time meeting him. I can't believe you don't have him in your vest. I was expecting super shocked.
It's climate change. It's too hot to wear the vest inside.
Yeah. So, I mean, but I think about all of those people. I think about my cousins who are incarcerated right now. I think about the people in all of our lives that we know. So many people have been touched by the criminal justice system. We all have, in some way, shape, or form. And the more time people spend away from society, the worse it is for all of us, in a multitude of different ways. And the more lives we're ruining, the more communities we're ruining, the more cities we're ruining. There's so many urgent needs. People shouldn't get overwhelmed, but those are things that come to me first.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. DeRay, what's looming large for you?
Yeah, so I spend most of my time trying to help people understand the impact that the system's already having on them. So, I'm in a lot of places now where people are like, well, I don't do politics. And I'm like, politics is doing you, right? So when we think about the system, it is a reminder that there are people that we chose who are making the decision. So when you think about that 20-year sentence that person got for drugs, it was a judge who was probably elected who started that path, right? When you think about your kid's classroom that doesn't have textbooks, it was probably like a school board that didn't have enough money because the legislature didn't get, making that connection with people, that's actually what I think, that's where I see a lot of disconnect, is that the system is like this abstract thing to people, and then elections are sort of like another abstract thing to people, and people don't get that it's like people made these decisions. People did it. People incarcerated your cousin, people underfunded your school system, people didn't fix the potholes in your neighborhood, people that you have the power to choose, they did that. And so when you say you're not in politics, it's like, no, politics is all up through all your stuff. It's that's a lot of time. And then obviously the police, it's weird. I think this moment is sort of oddly celebratory. The police have actually killed more people this year than last year. No dip, no decrease. The police are sort of unchanged. And I don't know if you know that, if you looked at all the magazine covers and all these sort of celebratory things, I'm like, the police are winning. So the police issue is really big to me because almost all of it is local. And the same thing with mass incarceration. 2.2 million people incarcerated. Only 200,000 of those 2.2 million are incarcerated in federal prison. So 2 million of them are actually incarcerated in state and local. And that is they're your people. Those are your city council people, your mayors, this is your people, and the people locking people up. Even when we think about things like private prisons, less than 8% of prisons are private. The vast majority of prisons are public. It is your governor and your mayor allowing exploitation to happen in all these places. It's not some random company, as people would like you to believe. So that's where I spend a lot of time, helping people realize that this terror is actually really close. And the decision making is actually really close. And if there's anything to take away from this administration, which is I know Stephanie is nonpartisan. She's a nonpartisan one for all us. When I think about it, it is what we did learn over 4 years is how fast the government can move if it wants to. Who thought you could rip up mailboxes out the street? I didn't even know that was a thing. That to me would have to take forever, but it was apparently not. You could just throw the sorting machines in the trash can. You could ban countries on Twitter. I didn't even know the government, it's such a big apparatus, and I thought it just moved a little slower. Apparently it doesn't, right? So part of that is also reminding people that you can put people in office to demand the big things. And if we can do all that horrific stuff, then we can definitely use the power and speed and might of the government for good. We can guarantee housing. We can guarantee healthcare. Like, we can actually do all this stuff, and we can do it in our lifetime. Like, I don't ever think that I'm fighting for like a 200-year thing. I think I'm going to be 90 and be like, whew, Steph, you remember that meeting in the White House? Police was killing people. God, it was hard. You know, like, that's what I feel really hopeful about.
Yeah, and that's just such a beautiful transition into what I wanted to talk about next is like, what are y'all learning about resilience watching all of this happen? What do you learn? What is giving you hope? We talked earlier about 2020 being the centennial of the ratification of the 19th Amendment and how long of a fight. I mean, there were suffragists who were campaigning their whole lifetime and didn't see the vote by the time that they passed. And so I'm constantly asking folks who come on NBT at home, because I'm so personally wanting to know, you know, where are you finding hope, and what is keeping your spirit fueled at this moment? Rhonda, do you mind if we start with you? I'm like, hot seat.
Summer 2020, want to get the blues. It started with a lockdown, then from top down, everything got confused. The police killed George Floyd. You tear gassed me on the news. And then in the midst of a pandemic raging, you're trying to put my kid in school. It'd be funny. It'd be so funny if it wasn't true.
Thank you.
Resilience is so amazing. You bring that word up because I talk about that a lot in the public speaking I do. I talk about resilience. I think it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning of this talk, which has to do with healing, self-love, self-care, and knowing. I love what DeRay just said, you know, being optimistic even when you don't necessarily see the all the proof of it. I think optimism and peace and joy come from something bigger than proof. Mm-hmm. And it comes from keeping your eye on the wise, right? It comes from something else. And for me, one of the things that I've done during this time, I got really clear about what my work is as an artist activist. I call myself also a social artist, that I need to be making work. I need to be telling the stories. I need to be writing my songs. I need to be doing that because that is my way. That's my version of self-care. And that's my version of keeping myself healed and well and focused and unafraid and optimistic. And so that's that was a piece of something I wrote during this time, just because it helps me kind of hold it together, you know? And so that's what I do to stay resilient. Mm-hmm. I talk a lot about, and also how I parent, to allow the bumps in the roads to be the bumps in the road, but know that something inside of me has a shock absorber that I can, the bumps don't need to, the bumps will change, but the bumps don't need to change right this second. I'm gonna shock absorb so I can keep driving where I need to go. You know? Yes. And so I think it's about self-care, self-love, and staying healed and staying focused.
Yeah. What are some things that you do to practice self-care? Is it like I do daily walks. I have to take a walk once a day. What are you doing? Being
outside is huge for me. Huge. As you saw how I started DeRay, I started outside and I had a technical issue. I came inside. But yeah, being outside is huge for me. I get my rest at night. I go to sleep. I get my hours. I eat well. I drink a lot of water. But separate from that, I'm a meditator. I'm a journaler. I get up early. My son gets up about 8, 9 o'clock. I'm up at 5 so that I can have those out every morning so I can have those hours that are mine. I journal, I write my songs, I meditate, I listen to a lot of a spiritual self-help type of personal growth stuff. I listen to it, I write it. So I do that, and I get outside every day, and I drink my water, and I go to sleep.
Thank you. I mean, and I ask about the specifics of what are your practices, because something that I'm very much interested in is how are we sharing ways of sustainability? How are we sharing ways of survival with each other? Yeah. Stephanie, do you want to speak to? Oh yeah, Rhonda, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just want, and I don't watch a lot of television. I watch very little television, mostly because it's too. They're throwing too much at me. Yeah, they're throwing too much at me, and it's too. I can't decipher it quickly enough, and I get overwhelmed by it. That's the television news. I also don't watch a lot of other television, mostly because I got too much to do. But staying informed cools me out. So as you see, I read a lot, and I research a lot. And so I'm always learning. That in the midst of everything else I just said, that helps a lot, but not having something talking at me all the time that I can't control.
I love it. Stephanie, what are you doing to keep sane?
Well, I'm working all the time right now. I kind of feel like I did when I worked on the Obama campaign in 2012. And I remember for 17 weeks straight, we worked 7 days a week towards the end. And I remember I just put my hair in the same ponytail every single day. And so that might be a form of my resilience, actually. Now I'm kind of thinking about it a little bit more. It's hard for me because when I left the Obama administration at the end, in January of 2017, I went and worked in corporate America for a couple of years, literally just like 2 or a year and a half. And I was unfulfilled in what I was doing during corporate communications, worked at 2 major television networks, and just decided this is not something I really wanted to do, especially when Mrs. Obama started this organization in 2018. And I did get called over. I was not running necessarily, but I knew that I wasn't fulfilled by what I was doing and I needed to do something more. And for me, what gets me through all of the moments is knowing that I'm doing the work. And is knowing that I am, through my work, through my personal sacrifice of nobody's really hanging out, but I legitimately don't have a real life right now. But being able to sacrifice those things and knowing that I'm in the game in a way, if that makes sense. It's important for me to feel like I'm doing the work. Now, obviously I'm a human and we're all human. We all have to have balance in our lives. So with, similar to Rhonda, I love the, and I always mess up the name, but it's a meditation app on
Headspace?
Apple. What's it called?
Headspace?
No, that's therapy.
No, not
Calm app. The Calm app.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's therapy. All of them. We need all the apps.
I don't do Headspace. I have a real therapist that I do talk to that I completely forget. I'm like, oops, my therapy time. But therapy is also something that's been super helpful for me during this period. And at the top of 2019 in January, I lost my father. So there's this is the last 2 years have just been terrible. So I've had to do everything that I can to make sure that I'm in a good space. And since I'm home, I have my nephews are 10 minutes down the road. One of them is 4 years old. So with the 4-year-old, anytime these kids don't care about anything going, he knows about coronavirus, trust me, but they are able to be resilient in a way that a lot of us aren't able to, but escape with them and to be in the moment with children, I think is so incredibly important, especially if you don't have your own yet. So those are some of the things. I'll say I do want to touch on what has given me hope though. What I've loved about campaigns in my life is that you're working so hard, 24 hours all the time, just completely focused on work, immersed in work, right? And then you sometimes get disillusioned. Like, am I making a difference? Is this really working? Then you go to a rally and then you see you see President Obama speak and everybody is like flipping out and I'm flipping out too. And like, it kind of gives you that energy, but COVID has taken that away. So you can't have that moment where you're really touching real people and you see how they're impacted by the work that you're doing. But we have these amazing volunteers called voting squad captains. We have almost 50,000 of them all around this country who have signed up to really engage in their community and get their communities organized, and to see them virtually on calls, telling us where they're from, all the things that they're doing, how excited they are to see all of that energy that they're bringing. I just feel like, I really do feel like things are shifting. And I feel a sense of people trying now to take more responsibility for their lives and for the future of this country by stepping up. Just all of the rainbow of people that we saw in the streets all over this country gave me hope. Seeing people dance in the streets during this moment has given me hope. And I, regardless of what's happening right now today, there's a disaster every day, but I can literally feel that energy from the people, which gives me more hope and a better sense of. And then to see the synergy from people all over this world standing up for Black lives in a way that we've just never ever seen before. People are standing in solidarity with us in every corner of the earth. That is magnificent, and we shouldn't shy away from feeling some good energy from that as well. So there's a lot of things that we can all be grateful for, and it's not all lost. And what DeRay said, true. It doesn't take a lot of time to unravel things. It does take a lot of time to pull things together. And the government it's like a cruise ship. You can't completely turn it around, but you can sink it pretty fast.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, but that is, I mean, you can set it on fire and just watch it, explode. But it is hard to do, I think, some of the things that we do, want to see. And we would sit in rooms for hours talking about police violence with police in the room, right? With people in the Department of Justice, with the folks that can and could make a difference, right? Bringing everybody to the table. And that takes leadership and that takes work.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Stephanie. DeRay, what's your...
The only thing I'd add is that, I was... recently, I was wondering, I was like, why aren't the white people mad about what's going on with some of the police stuff? And I was just like, I don't get it. I'm like, y'all are dying too. This guy don't care about, you should be. And I realized that some of what I was doing was actually projecting that, there's something really interesting about the way that Black people have always understood community as expansive and as y'all are my sisters. And that's we sort of embody it because we've had to, that we knew that family could never be rooted in legal relationships because we were denied those. We knew that family couldn't be rooted in place because those were ripped up from us. We knew that family couldn't be rooted in the nuclear space because we were that style was actually stripped from us so long ago. So our sense of family has always been expansive. Our sense of community has always been sort of an expansive thing where my cousins in Wauwatosa and my I feel like they my brothers and sisters and that language is not just language, but it is actually how we live and build, because we have always understood that power comes from relationships. It doesn't come from hierarchy, right? When I think about sort of the magic of Blackness that, so when you call it resilience, when I think about this magic, it is because we always know that we are standing with a community much bigger than the people directly around us. We are always in solidarity with them. We are fighting for. So when Stephanie talks about you're going into the voting booth, voting for more than you, I'm I am always thinking about God, my great grandmother is not here anymore, but she would have it would have been crazy for her to see a world like this. And she did not pick 10 cents a pound of cotton for me not to exercise this thing that she didn't have the right to do. That is heavy on me. That is a real thing. And I think that in sort of Black communities, our sense of our responsibility to the community is actually just a source of power. I think it's why our music is so rich, and why our culture is so rich, and why our art is so rich, and why our sort of analysis around sort of what works and doesn't is because we always are a part of something magical that extends far beyond our physical reach. So when I think about how I stay whole in moments like this, I play in the how we win. Like that is sort of where I play. So in the way that Stephanie is like, I'm busy all the time and doing work. It's like I'm not sitting in the problem. I'm not like repeating the problem back to you every day. I wake up every day. It's called Campaign Zero because we can live in a world where the police don't kill people. So every day I'm like waking up trying to like, what's the new way to get to zero? Like no one strategy will get us there. So we know there's no silver bullet. And this question of how do you eat an elephant, you answer one bite at a time, right? But there's a version of that says one bite after another, which is incrementalism. We don't believe that. There's another version, though, that says everybody's biting at the same time. That this is actually like a full court press. And the only way we'll win is a full court press. That the institutions we're up against, they'll always win if we do like one thing in January, another thing in July. Like institutions will just like pop back. That's what they do. But when you're like, we're going to take this down and this and replace it with this and then like all at one time, the full court press is what we have to do. So every day when I wake up, I'm like, what's the next bite? Like, how can we have all these people biting at the same time so we get it? And the same thing with voting, right? It's like, we're trying to build a big house. One tool won't do it. So it's like, how do we make sure that people like are equipped to use they have the tools, everybody got the toolkit, but some of them don't know how to use the wrench. So how do we help you like figure out how to run for office? Some of them don't know how to use a hammer. How do we help you testify before the council, right? Like, so I play in the how. The how is what keeps me sane.
Oh, I mean, this has just been such a fruitful conversation. I mean, so rich with like strategies and tactics and getting down into like the real structures of what we can do. And I feel very hopeful. I feel like I came into the conversation like, oh, this is a heavy conversation today. Like I don't really know, but I feel like I'm very much some of the, Rhonda, as you say, some of these feelings have been untangled, and I'm able to see them in their wholeness, and I'm able to feel activated and empowered because I feel so informed by the guests that I had on this evening. I mean, it's really, really, really a gift and really a pleasure. I want to thank everybody. Stephanie, thank you for coming with the knowledge. Thank you for coming with the strategy. I mean, really really infused me with this like almost Shirley Chisholm energy of like, we're going to go and we're going to do this. And we are on the path. We are on the trail to go do this. So thank you for joining us, Stephanie, Rhonda. Oh my God, thank you. Rhonda, thank you for just bringing all of the magic of the song that you sung. I mean, you just have brought such a light and the creativity and artistry to this conversation. DeRay, thank you for joining us for our last little bit of this segment, but bringing such a knowledge and a wealth of insight and wisdom around resilience and the mechanisms of resilience and how we are going to make it through this moment, because we are our own salvation. That's what it comes down to. There's an artist who is actually one of our commission artists, Lady Dane Figueroa EDD. She wrote a piece that was actually one of the first pieces that we released. And that is one of the statements that she makes is we are our own salvation. That's it. So I want to thank you all for joining me this evening. I'm going to sign off right now. Don't forget your voter to do today. Vote early. As Stephanie said, make that voting plan. Know what you're going to go do, where, and there was a lot of resources that we mentioned in this episode about who to call. There's a whole hotline of who to call should anything arise at the polls for you. So do that, assert your citizenship, and we will see you on October 29th for the final installment of this conversation series. My love to you all. Thank you. Thank you.